Stop the drama. Everyone helps out around here and you just complain. Helps out. I am your mother. Respect me. Then behave like one and don't get in the way anymore. In that instant, I realized I had stopped being a mother. I am 68 years old. I am the mother, the owner of the house I built, working for decades. And even so, I heard this from my own daughter in the kitchen I paid for, while my son-in-law rummaged through the fridge as if he owned everything. Lunch needs to be better. My family is coming today, he said without looking at me. And you need to keep quiet, my daughter added, her voice bone dry. Quiet in my own house? I asked. She crossed her arms. Don't start. Today is not the day for drama. The smell of burnt coffee drifted upward. My grandkids walked right past me without a good morning. You can wash everything later, I heard. I took a deep breath. My hand trembled against the dish towel. You decide everything around here without consulting me, I asked. Oh, Mom, the house belongs to the family now, she replied with a humorless laugh. That was the exact moment something went cold inside me, because if the house belonged to the family, somebody needed to remind them who held the deed. I opened the drawer slowly and grabbed something that would make them regret everything they had done to me all these years. Today, I woke up at 5 in the morning, just like I have for so many years. But for the first time, I felt a strange weight in my chest. It was as if something deep inside was warning me that this day would be unlike any other. At 68, after 45 years of raising my daughter Sarah all by myself, working 3 jobs to pay off this house that no longer feels like mine, I feel like a trespasser in the very home I built, brick by brick, with my own sweat and tears. Sarah came down to the kitchen where I was making breakfast, a daily ritual since she moved her husband Ryan and their 2 kids in here 3 years ago. Mom, Ryan's family is coming for lunch today, so go all out on the food and make sure the house is spotless, she said. She didn't even lift her eyes from her phone. Her tone was the exact same one I used to use when giving orders to the janitorial staff back when I was a cleaning supervisor at the hospital. Cold, distant. Of course, sweetheart, I answered softly, feeling that familiar ache spread across my chest. It was always like this when she spoke to me, like I was a stranger doing her a favor, not the mother who bled her youth dry so she could go to college and have a better life. Ryan appeared right after. He walked straight past me, didn't bother with a good morning, and made a beeline for the fridge. He grabbed the orange juice I had just freshly squeezed and poured himself a massive glass. Hope my mom is coming to see the house today, so make sure everything is shining, Ryan said, gulping down my juice. The way he pronounced my name, Hope, sounded like he was barking an order at the hired help. The name my own mother picked out with so much love. Telling everyone I was the hope of the family now sounded like dirt in the mouth of a man who had never paid a single dime toward a bill in this house. I swallowed the lump in my throat and kept making breakfast for the whole family. Matthew and Chloe, my grandkids, 12 and 10, came running downstairs and slid straight into their chairs at the table. No greetings. It had been months since they last told me good morning or hugged me the way they used to when they were little. Now they treated me like a piece of furniture, a fixture that dispensed food and folded laundry, not the grandmother who practically raised them in their early years while Sarah was working. I served the plates in silence, watching my family animatedly discuss their weekend plans. Plans that didn't include me. Sarah was scrolling through photos of a restaurant she wanted to take Ryan to on Saturday night. When I asked if it was going to be a whole family outing, she answered without looking up. Oh, Mom, it's a place for young couples. You wouldn't like it. Besides, someone needs to stay here and watch the house. My heart tightened. I wasn't even considered part of the family when it came to having fun. My only utility was cooking, scrubbing, washing, and babysitting when they went out. I started clearing the dirty plates, and that was when Sarah made the comment that finally snapped the last thread inside me. Mom, when Ryan's mother gets here, just keep a low profile, okay? She's very particular and doesn't like drama. Drama? I asked, unable to process what I was hearing. Oh, you know, your habit of asking too many questions, always wanting to jump into adult conversations. It's really important for Ryan to make a good impression on his family today, Sarah said. Her voice made me feel like an untrained dog that needed to be kept on a short leash. In that exact moment, something inside me shattered in a way I had never felt before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was a strange glacial cold that flooded my chest, as if my heart was throwing up walls to protect itself from all that blinding ingratitude. I remembered when Sarah was little, waking me up in the dead of night, crying from nightmares, and how I would rock her in my arms, singing softly until she fell back asleep. I remembered working double shifts when she decided she wanted to go to college, picking up weekend rotations just to cover her tuition. I remembered selling my only gold ring to buy her graduation dress. And now, 45 years later, I was just drama in the house I bought with my own blood and money. I kept washing the dishes in silence. The tears burned the edges of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. And then Ryan made a comment that would alter the course of my life forever. "Sarah, your mom really is handy to have around. At least we don't have to pay for a maid, right? It's like having free domestic labor," he said, chuckling at his own joke. Sarah laughed along with him and nodded. "It's true. Mom has always been a workaholic. She just doesn't know how to sit still." A workaholic. Free domestic labor. The words ricocheted inside my skull like a painful echo that refused to die down. All these years I thought I was helping my family, being a devoted mother and grandmother. But to them, I was just cheap labor, living in the very house I paid off with 40 years of backbreaking work. I finished washing the dishes and retreated to my room. It was the smallest bedroom in the house, tucked all the way in the back. Sarah had assigned it to me when they first moved in. "It's quieter, Mom. You're going to love it," she had said at the time. Now I understood it was just to keep me out of the main living areas to ensure I wouldn't intrude on the young couple's life. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked around the modest little room. The walls held a few old photos of Sarah as a little girl, back when it was just the two of us against the world. Back then, she used to tell me that when she grew up, she was going to take care of me, just like I took care of her. Where was that sweet girl who promised me eternal love? When did she turn into this cold woman who treated me like a burden in my own home? I reached into the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out an envelope I had kept hidden for years. Inside were all the documents for the house. The payoff statement, the deed, the title, everything in my name. Sarah never wanted to know about the bureaucratic details of the property. She always said paperwork was boring. She had absolutely no idea that I was still the sole legal owner of everything. I also pulled out a small ledger where I tracked my savings. Through all those years, even while funding Sarah's education, even while paying the household bills on my own, I managed to stash a little away every single month. It wasn't a fortune, but it was $62,000 that I had scraped together penny by penny, working as a hospital supervisor and scrubbing floors on the weekends. $62,000 that Sarah didn't even know existed. That was when I heard the sound of tires pulling into the driveway and animated voices outside. Ryan's family had arrived for the special lunch. I heard Sarah shouting from the living room, "Mom, they're here! Come serve coffee for the guests!" I tucked the documents and the bank book back into the drawer. I took a deep breath and walked out to the living room to play my role as the free domestic help one more time. But as I walked down the hallway of my own house, something inside me had fundamentally shifted. A calm, calculated chill had taken over my thoughts, as if a part of me had just woken up from a decades-long coma. Ryan's mother, Constance, was an elegant, impeccably dressed woman who looked me up and down when Sarah introduced me as the mother who lives here and helps out around the house. "How lucky you are," Constance said, flashing a plastic smile, "to have someone to take care of everything. It's so hard to find trustworthy people to work in the house these days." Trustworthy people to work in the house? Sarah didn't even bother correcting the assumption that I was the hired help. Instead, she smiled and nodded. "Yeah, Mom has always been very dedicated to housework." I served the coffee in dead silence, listening to Constance praise the living room, decor, the furniture, the garden, as if all of it had been manifested by her son's sheer brilliance. Ryan soaked up the compliments with a proud grin, bragging about his plans to upgrade the house even further. My house, my furniture, my garden, which I had planted with my own two hands. During lunch, I stayed in the kitchen whipping up dessert while laughter echoed from the dining room. Not once did anyone invite me to pull up a chair. Sarah only popped into the kitchen to demand more ice for the drinks, and when I asked if I could join them after dessert, she whispered, "Mom, just let them be. Constance is very formal. She wouldn't feel comfortable with you at the table. She wouldn't feel comfortable with me. At my own table, in my own house, bought with my own money. In that exact moment, staring out the kitchen window, at the garden where I had nurtured every single flower, where I had built every planter box with my bare hands, I finally understood that I no longer had a place in this family. Sarah had turned me into the maid of my own life, and the most agonizing part was that I had allowed it to happen. When the guests finally left, Sarah strolled into the kitchen, where I was up to my elbows in dishwater. "Thanks for today, Mom. Constance loved the food and was really impressed with the house service. I think we made a great impression," she said, looking thoroughly pleased with herself. "You're welcome," I murmured, my eyes fixed on the sink. "Oh, and Mom, next weekend, we're taking a trip to the beach. You'll stay here and watch the house, right? We really need a few days to unwind." "Just the four of us," Sarah said, dropping the information like it was an undeniable law of physics. The four of us? I wasn't even included in the four of us of my own bloodline. "That's fine," was all I could manage to say. That night, lying on my narrow bed in the back room, I stared at the ceiling and felt a bizarre sense of absolute clarity washing over me. For 45 years, I had been a mother. I worked, I fought, I bled, I sacrificed everything for my daughter, and she repaid me by turning me into a ghost in my own home. I grabbed the documents from the drawer again and held them up to the dim light of the bedside lamp. Hope Silva Medeiros, sole proprietor of the property. No other name on the deed. No other liable party. Just me. For the first time in years, I smiled alone in the dark. Sarah had no idea what was coming. But tomorrow everything was going to change. The next morning, I woke up an hour earlier than usual, at 4 in the morning, and couldn't drift back to sleep. Yesterday's words were still bouncing around inside my skull like a scratched record that refused to stop spinning. Free domestic labor. Trustworthy people to work in the house. She wouldn't feel comfortable with you at the table. Every sentence was a heavy stone stacking up on my chest, pressing down until I couldn't breathe. I got up in the quiet dark and went to the kitchen to make breakfast, just like always. But today, for the first time in years, I looked at my surroundings through a different lens. That kitchen, which I had designed myself, agonizing over every tile and every cabinet, now looked alien, like I was a tourist who didn't quite know her way around. The pots and pans I had bought, one by one, over years of grinding labor, the matching plates I had saved up for months to buy as a complete set, it all felt like it belonged to someone else. As the coffee brewed, the memories of how hard it was to get this house came flooding back. Sarah was 15 when I finally scraped together enough cash for the down payment. I worked Monday through Friday as a cleaning supervisor at the county hospital, and on weekends I scrubbed floors in 3 different houses. I would drag myself through the front door at 11 at night, dead on my feet, but I always found Sarah waiting up for me so we could eat dinner together. "Mom, one day when I grow up, I'm going to buy you an even bigger house than this," she would say, as we chewed on cheap sandwiches at the cramped table of our old studio apartment. "You'll never have to work this hard again. I'm going to take care of you the way you take care of me." The tears started rolling down my cheeks as I stirred the coffee on the stove. Where was that loving little girl who promised to take care of me in my old age? When did she mutate into this woman who only saw me as a convenient appliance to fix her household problems? "Mom, why are you up so early?" I turned around and saw Sarah standing in the kitchen doorway wearing a robe, her hair a messy bird's nest. For a fleeting second, a spark of hope flared in my chest. Maybe she woke up to talk to me. Maybe she wanted to apologize for how she treated me yesterday. "I just couldn't sleep," I replied quickly, wiping the wet heat from my face. "Oh well, since you're up, can you make a really strong pot of coffee?" "Ryan has a massive meeting today and needs to be sharp," she said, pulling a glass of water from the fridge. She didn't ask why I couldn't sleep. She didn't notice I was crying. She didn't show a single ounce of concern. It was just another work order. "Sure," I whispered. Sarah padded back to her bedroom without another word, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my silent grief. I went back to brewing the extra strong coffee for Ryan, playing the good employee catering to the boss's demands. The sheer irony of the situation hit me like a bucket of ice water. I was brewing specialty coffee for a man who lived rent-free under my roof and treated me like the hired help. When the family finally descended for breakfast, they brought their usual suffocating indifference. Ryan complained the coffee was a bit too bitter. Sarah ordered me to scramble some eggs for the kids because they suddenly didn't feel like eating toast. And the grandkids ignored me completely, their faces glued to their glowing screens. "Mom, I'm going shopping with Constance today," Sarah announced while buttering a piece of bread. "She's going to help me pick out some things to completely redo the living room decor." "The living room?" I asked, bewildered. "Yeah, it's getting kind of sickening to look at. We want to modernize it," Ryan chimed in like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Modernize the living room that I had decorated with so much love, upgrading piece by piece over the span of a decade. The living room where every object held a story, every picture frame a cherished memory. They wanted to scrub my existence right out of the drywall. "And where are you going to put my things?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Sarah sighed dramatically, as if I had just asked the stupidest question on earth. "Oh, Mom, your stuff can just go in your room. Those old photos and all those little knickknacks just don't fit the vibe we're going for." Knickknacks. My entire life reduced to knickknacks that ruined their aesthetic. The photos of her college graduation, the souvenirs from our modest little road trips, the small treasures I had collected over a lifetime of hard work. All of it was just clutter standing in the way of their modern vision. After they all left for the day, I was left alone in the echoing quiet of the house. I walked into the living room and stared at every single detail they wanted to destroy. The sofa I bought when I got my first promotion at the hospital, the coffee table I scored at a clearance sale, the one Sarah used to say she loved when she was a teenager. The curtains I sewed with my own hands because I couldn't afford store-bought ones. I picked up a framed photo from the bookshelf. It was Sarah on the day she got her business degree. I was standing right next to her, beaming with pride, wearing the nicest dress I owned, which I had saved specifically for that moment. I remembered working double shifts for 5 straight years to pay for that degree, slashing my own grocery budget, eating less, just so there would be enough money for her tuition. "Thank you for everything, Mom. I never could have done this without you," she had told me that day, squeezing me in a tight hug. "Now it's my turn to take care of you." I clutched the picture frame to my chest and sobbed in a way I hadn't sobbed in years. It wasn't a quiet, dignified crying. It was a guttural weeping pulled straight from the bottom of my soul. I cried for the loving daughter I had lost. I cried for the years of sacrifice that apparently meant absolutely nothing. I cried for the woman who had become entirely invisible inside her own walls. I retreated to my room and opened the closet where I kept my most precious belongings. There was an old shoebox stuffed with letters Sarah had written me when she went to a summer camp at 16. I pulled one out at random and read the faded ink, "Mommy, I miss you so much I could die. I can't wait to come home and give you a giant hug. You are the most important person in my life, and I love you more than anything in the world. When I grow up, I'm going to be such a good daughter that you'll be proud of me forever. I love you to infinity, Sarah." The bubbly, careful handwriting of that teenager was a brutal contrast to the ice-cold woman she had become. I read a few more letters, all dripping with love, affection, and promises to take care of me in the future. Where was that girl? What the hell happened to all that love? I put the letters back in the box and pulled out my old photo album. It was filled with pictures of us at every cheap local spot we could afford to visit. The zoo, the city park, the school fall festival. In every single one of them, Sarah was glued to my side, smiling, radiant. We were an inseparable duo, taking on the world. The sound of a key turning in the front door ripped me out of my nostalgia. Sarah had returned from shopping with Constance. I could hear the two of them chattering excitedly about fabrics, color palettes, and aesthetics as they hauled the shopping bags inside. They didn't call me out to see what they bought. They didn't ask for my opinion on a single thread. I walked down to the kitchen to start prepping lunch right on cue. I found Sarah and Constance spreading fabric swatches all over the dining room table. "Hope, could you brew us some tea, please?" Constance asked, not even bothering to look up from the swatches. "Of course," I answered on autopilot. While the water boiled, I listened to them scheme about gutting the entire room. Sarah, you are so incredibly lucky to have someone so helpful taking care of the house, Constance said. It's near impossible to find reliable help these days. Tell me about it. Mom has always been obsessed with chores. I've watched her work since I was a little kid, so honestly, she doesn't really know how to do anything else, Sarah replied, letting out a light laugh. She doesn't really know how to do anything else. The words sliced through me like a razor blade. To Sarah, I was just a limited, simple-minded creature, incapable of existing beyond the realm of a broom and a mop. She had completely, conveniently forgotten that I was a supervisor at a hospital, that I managed staff, that I took care of hundreds of people besides her, that I had dreams and raw ambition, that I suffocated just to make sure she had a future. I served the tea in silence and walked back to the kitchen, my hands trembling with a toxic cocktail of grief and rage. It was as if my own flesh and blood had flattened me into a one-dimensional cardboard cutout. No past, no dreams, no worth beyond my ability to scrub a floor. During lunch, Sarah proudly announced the grand renovation plans. We're going to replace almost everything in the living room and dining room. It's going to look so much more modern and cozy, she said, her eyes shining. And my things? I asked, giving it one last try. Mom, we already talked about this. Your stuff stays in your room, Sarah snapped, her tone dripping with impatience, like she was scolding a stubborn toddler who kept asking the same question. Ryan chimed in. Hope, you're going to love the changes. The house is going to finally look like a young family lives here. It'll be more upbeat. A young family house, as if I wasn't part of the family, as if my very existence was dragging the mood down and making the house less young. That afternoon, while they went out to buy their shiny new furniture, I was left alone once again. I walked slowly through the house, committing every corner to memory before it was wiped clean, erasing the evidence that I had ever lived here. I walked out to the garden I had planted with my own 2 hands and sat on the wooden bench I had built under the mango tree. Out there, surrounded by the flowers I had kept alive for years, I let a painful but absolute clarity take the wheel. Sarah didn't look at me and see a mother anymore. To her, I was just a convenient, cost-free solution to her domestic problems. Ryan saw me as a talking appliance. My grandkids were being actively trained to treat me the exact same way. I had mutated into a ghost haunting my own life. I grabbed a small hand trowel from the gardening shed and started digging a hole right next to the roots of the mango tree. I took the shoebox full of Sarah's loving teenage letters and buried it in the dirt, as if I were lowering my lost daughter into a grave. That sweet, loving girl was dead, and the woman standing in her place only saw me as an unpaid servant. When I finished, I brushed the damp soil from my hands and looked up at the house I had built with so much love. For the first time in 45 years of motherhood, I understood a brutal truth. There comes a point in life where a mother's love just isn't enough. Sometimes, to salvage whatever dignity you have left, you have to make a choice that breaks your own heart. I walked back inside with a strange, intoxicating sense of liberation and headed straight for my bedroom. I pulled the house deed and my bank statements out of the drawer. I stared at the name printed in bold black ink on the legal documents. Hope Silva Medeiros. Not Sarah. Not Ryan. Hope. Right then and there, I started mapping out a plan that was going to rip our lives apart forever. Sarah wanted me to vanish from the decor. She wanted to shrink me down into an invisible maid. Fair enough. Tomorrow, she was going to find out exactly what it means to lose the mother she despised so much. I woke up the following Monday with a sensation I hadn't felt in decades. Absolute, unbreakable resolve. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't grief. It was a cold, razor-sharp calm that washed over me, as if a much stronger version of myself had finally kicked the door down and taken over. I glanced at the alarm clock, 4:30 in the morning, and for a brief moment, I smiled, alone in the dark. Today marked the beginning of the most massive shift of my life. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen to prepare the family's breakfast one last time, even though they were completely oblivious to that fact. As I stirred the coffee on the stove, my brain was firing with a clarity that shocked even me. For 45 years, I had been the devoted mother, the reliable grandmother, the woman who erased herself just to serve everyone else. Starting today, I was going to be Hope again. When Sarah came downstairs for breakfast, I had everything laid out perfectly, like always. She grabbed a mug without making eye contact and muttered, "Mom, the new furniture is arriving today. Can you just stay in your room while they're here? I don't want you getting in the delivery guy's way." "Of course," I answered, using my usual submissive tone. But beneath the surface, the tectonic plates had already shifted. Every little drop of her disdain just poured concrete over my resolve. Ryan strutted down a minute later and announced, "Hope my mom is coming over for dinner tonight to see the new setup. Go all out on the food. It's really important she approves of everything." "You got it," I replied smoothly, pouring his coffee with the exact same mechanical efficiency I always had. Once they all funneled out the door for work and school, I put my plan into motion. First, I called the bank where I had held my account for 15 years. "Good afternoon. I need to wire my entire account balance to a new institution," I told the teller. "Certainly, Mrs. Medeiros. May I ask the reason for the transfer?" "I'm relocating to a different neighborhood," I explained flatly. Within 2 hours, my $62,000 was sitting safely in a brand new account at a completely different bank on the other side of the city. No shared debit cards, no family access, just my money. The blood and sweat of a lifetime of labor. Next, I dialed the law firm located right near the hospital where I used to work. "Dr. Carter, this is Hope Medeiros. I need to consult with you regarding my rights as the sole legal proprietor of a piece of real estate." "Of course, Hope. Can you come into the office tomorrow to discuss it?" "Absolutely. I need to know everything there is to know about property liquidation and eviction proceedings," I said, my voice ringing with an authority that surprised even me. I hung up the phone and took a long look around the house that very soon would no longer be mine. I walked through the rooms, tracing the details, locking it all into my memory. I didn't feel a shred of nostalgia. It was just a bizarre sense of finality. It felt like I was packing up to leave a life that had never truly belonged to me in the first place. The rumble of a moving truck pulling up out front snapped me out of my trance. It was the new furniture Sarah had ordered to scrub the final traces of my existence from the floor plan. I retreated to my room exactly as she had ordered, but I stood by the window and watched the delivery guys haul my old furniture out to the curb. The sofa where I had rocked Sarah to sleep when she was sick. The coffee table where we spent hundreds of hours doing homework together. The bookshelf that held our favorite paperbacks. All of it tossed into the back of a truck like disposable garbage. Sarah came home right at lunchtime, practically vibrating with excitement to see the finished product. "Oh my God, it's flawless," she shrieked from the living room. "Ryan, get in here. It looks like a completely different house." And she was right. When I walked out to serve lunch, I couldn't even recognize my own living room. Sleek, modern furniture, sterile, cold colors, completely stripped of the family history that had breathed life into those walls for decades. It looked nice, sure, but it was hollow, soulless. Exactly what our relationship had become. "Mom, what do you think?" Sarah asked, clearly fishing for a compliment. "It looks very modern," I replied, my face a blank slate. "That's exactly what we were going for. A young, upbeat house, without all that heavy old junk dragging the vibe down," Ryan said, looking incredibly smug. Old junk. My entire existence summarized as heavy old junk. I offered a sad, tight smile and walked back to the kitchen to finish prepping lunch. Every word out of their mouths just proved that I was doing exactly what needed to be done. That afternoon, while they were out admiring their sterile new kingdom, I kept moving the chess pieces in total silence. I called Martha, my 80-year-old neighbor who lived alone in the house next door. "Martha, it's Hope. Can I come over in a bit to talk to you about something really important?" "Of course, honey. You sound different today. Did something happen?" "I'll explain when I get there. There are some major changes coming," I said cryptically. Later, while Sarah and Ryan were still at work, I slipped over to Martha's place. She welcomed me with fresh coffee and pound cake just like she always did. We sat on her back porch, and I laid the whole situation out on the table. "Martha, I need a massive favor. Can I store a few boxes at your place for a couple of days?" "Of course, sweetie. But what on earth is going on? I've never seen you look this fiercely determined." I gave her the condensed version of how I was being treated inside my own walls, how Sarah had downgraded me to the status of a live-in maid. Martha's eyes welled up with tears as I spoke. Hope, that is a god-awful injustice. After everything you did for that girl, I watched you raise her on your own, working yourself to the bone to give her the world. Which is exactly why I'm making a very hard choice. I'm selling the house and starting over somewhere else, I said without a tremor in my voice. Oh, honey, are you absolutely sure she's your daughter, Hope? Martha, a daughter who loves me doesn't treat me like the hired help. A daughter who respects me doesn't erase my existence from the very house I paid for. I explained, the iron in my voice shocking me all over again. Martha agreed to hide my most precious belongings. For the rest of the afternoon, I made several stealthy trips back and forth, smuggling my personal documents. My few sentimental pieces of jewelry, my favorite clothes, and the keepsakes I couldn't bear to lose, into her spare bedroom. When the family rolled back in later that evening, everything looked perfectly normal. I cooked the extravagant dinner for Ryan's mother just as I was told. I set the table with the fine china. I played the role of the flawless, invisible servant they expected me to be. Constance arrived right on the dot at 7, looking sharp as ever, and immediately launched into excessive praise for the new decor, congratulating Sarah and Ryan on their exquisite taste and the beautiful home they had built for themselves. Not once was it mentioned that this was my house, that I had bought every single brick with my own blood and sweat. Throughout dinner, I stayed anchored in the kitchen, right on script, serving food and clearing plates. I listened to the roaring laughter echoing from the dining room, the animated chatter about their future plans, acting as if I didn't even exist. And for the very first time, being shut out didn't hurt. All I felt was a bizarre, floating tranquility. "Hope, bring out another bottle of wine, would you?" Ryan yelled from the dining room. "Right away," I answered. But this time I paid attention to the cadence of my own voice. It was smooth, steady, zero submission. I was pouring wine in this house for the very last time. After Constance finally left, Sarah wandered into the kitchen, where I was scrubbing the pots. "Thanks, Mom." Dinner was perfect, and Constance was obsessed with everything. She said our house looks like it belongs in a magazine. "That's nice," I replied, completely deadpan. "Oh, and Mom, I forgot to tell you. Next weekend we're spending 2 days at Ryan's parents' beach house. You'll watch the place here, right? And while we're gone, give the house a deep clean. With all the furniture moving, everything got super dusty." Watch the place? Give it a deep clean? As if it were my God-given duty to scrub their property while they got drunk on a beach. In that precise second, whatever microscopic shred of doubt I had left evaporated into thin air. "Sure," I replied simply. That night, I lay in my bed and stared up at the ceiling for a long time. I felt an incredible peace, like a 1,000-pound boulder had been rolled off my chest. For decades, I had carried the crushing weight of needing to be indispensable to my family. Now I understood that they never viewed me as essential. They only viewed me as convenient. Tuesday morning, I marched into Dr. Carter's office right on schedule. He walked me through every single right I held as the sole proprietor of the real estate. "Hope you can liquidate this property whenever you see fit. Since your name is the only one on the deed, you do not need authorization from a single living soul," he explained patiently. "And what if there are people currently occupying the house?" I asked. "Well, you give them a legal time frame to vacate the premises. 30 days is standard under the law. And I can sell it to anyone I want?" "Absolutely. It's your property." I walked out of his office clutching a folder stuffed with legal documents and actionable advice. I also walked out with the business cards of 3 top-tier real estate agents who could move the house fast. For the rest of the week, I played my part perfectly, keeping up my normal routine while quietly pulling the strings in the background. I called the realtors and found out my house was worth way more than I had guessed, $220,000, thanks to the neighborhood gentrifying. 220 grand plus my savings would be more than enough to buy a nice little condo in a different zip code and live comfortably for the rest of my days. By Thursday, I was touring apartments across town. The second one I saw stole my heart instantly. 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room, a simple kitchen, tucked into a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood with plenty of older folks. The asking price was $85,000. "Can I pay in cash?" I asked the realtor. "Perfect, we can close next week." Friday night, Sarah bounded into the kitchen, practically glowing. "Mom, we're heading out to the beach first thing tomorrow morning. We'll be back Sunday night. You've got everything handled here, right?" "Of course," I replied for the absolute last time. They peeled out of the driveway Saturday morning, loaded down with luggage and good vibes. They waved from the car windows like they were saying goodbye to a temp worker, not the matriarch of the family. Matthew and Chloe didn't even bother looking back. The second their taillights vanished around the corner, I pulled the trigger. First, I called the real estate agent and booked the property inspection for first thing Monday morning. Then I started packing the last of my essentials into a small carry-on bag. I didn't need much. The heavy lifting was already sitting safely in Martha's spare room. Sunday afternoon, I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. My hand didn't shake once as the pen hit the paper. Sarah, for 45 years, I was your mother, with every ounce of love in my heart. I raised you alone. I worked double shifts so you could have everything. I sacrificed my youth to fund your dreams. In return, you turned me into a maid inside my own home. Today, I woke up and realized that being a mother does not mean absorbing disrespect. Being family does not mean being convenient. You taught me that I have no place in this house, so I am taking your lesson to heart. This house is being sold. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Do not try to find me. Signed, Hope Silva Medeiros, owner. I folded the letter with sharp, deliberate creases and left it dead center on the kitchen island. I grabbed my small bag, locked the front door of the house for the final time, and walked over to Martha's place to spend the night. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" Martha asked when she saw my face. "For the first time in years, everything is perfectly okay," I replied, flashing a genuine smile. Sunday night, my cell phone lit up. It was Sarah. I let it ring. Ryan tried next. Ignored. They left a barrage of voicemails, but I didn't listen to a single one. Monday morning, while I was sipping coffee at Martha's kitchen table, my phone started buzzing off the hook. Sarah, Ryan, Sarah again. I powered the device down and smiled. The real estate agent showed up at 9 sharp for the walkthrough. I unlocked the front door with my own keys, the keys to my property, and shadowed him as he evaluated every room. Gorgeous property, Hope. We won't have any trouble moving this fast. Excellent. I want it done as quickly as humanly possible. When I locked the door and handed the spare keys to the agent, a rush of pure, unadulterated freedom hit my bloodstream. At 68 years old, Hope Silva Medeiros was finally off the leash to be herself again. My phone vibrated in my pocket, another call from Sarah. This time, I swiped to answer. "Hello? Mom, where the hell are you? What is this note supposed to mean? Have you completely lost your mind?" I hung up the phone without saying a word and smiled at Martha. The storm was just making landfall. Over the next 3 days, my phone basically turned into a distress beacon. Sarah called every hour on the hour, her voicemails escalating in panic. At first, it was pure rage. "Mom, you have completely lost it. Come back to the house right now and knock off this psychotic stunt." Then came the emotional terrorism. "Mom, the kids keep asking for you. They don't understand where Grandma went." And finally, when the reality set in that I wasn't backing down, the begging started. "Please, Mom, let's just sit down and talk. I promise I'll change. I promise I'll treat you better." I didn't answer a single call. I didn't text back once. For the first time in my life, I weaponized my silence, and it was the most powerful thing I had ever done. Martha watched me with a cocktail of deep concern and sheer awe. "Hope, are you absolutely sure you know what you're doing? She is still your daughter, despite all her massive screw-ups." "Martha, for 45 years I was a mother. Right now, it's time for me to just be Hope," I told her over our morning coffee. Some lessons only stick when you lose the thing you refused to value. On Wednesday, I got the call I had been waiting for from the agent. "Hope, we have 3 interested buyers. One of them wants to make an all-cash offer at full asking price." "I accept," I said, not missing a beat. "You don't want to know who the buyer is or negotiate any contingencies?" "Nope, I just want the sale closed fast and permanently." That afternoon, I sat across a mahogany desk at the title company and signed the closing papers. $220,000 wired directly into my private account. Combined with my savings, I was looking at nearly $300,000 to reboot my life at 68. More than enough to buy my new condo outright and live the rest of my days in total peace. The escrow officer gave me a weird look when he saw the property address. Hope it's not exactly common for someone to liquidate their primary residence without giving the family a heads up. Doctor, my family already made it crystal clear I wasn't welcome there. I just put the reality of the situation down on paper, I explained smoothly. I walked out of that office feeling a high I hadn't felt in decades. I strolled through downtown, watching the crowds, the skyscrapers, the rush of the city. It was like I was seeing the world in high definition for the first time. At 68, my life was just starting. Thursday morning, while Martha and I were having coffee on her front porch, we watched a very familiar SUV pull up to my old house. It was Sarah, with Ryan and the kids in tow. They piled out of the car, dragging suitcases, clearly returning from their extended beach vacation, probably planning to ambush me and force me to change my mind. Sarah grabbed the handle of the front door and immediately realized the deadbolts had been swapped. I watched her yank her phone out and start dialing like a maniac. My phone vibrated on the table, but I just took a slow sip of my coffee. Ryan started pacing around the perimeter of the house, rattling windows, looking for a way in. The kids just stood on the sidewalk next to their luggage, looking confused and terrified. For a split second, a sharp pain hit my chest, seeing Matthew and Chloe like that. It wasn't their fault their parents were parasitic ingrates, but then my brain played the highlight reel of how they had been treating me for the last year, mirroring their parents' toxic disrespect, calling me the maid grandma, treating me like I was invisible. The momentary guilt evaporated, replaced by a cold, serene resolve. "Hope they're literally banging on the door of your house," Martha whispered, clearly on edge. "It's not my house anymore," I said softly, "and they're about to figure that out." An hour later, a car with the real estate agency's logo pulled up to the curb. The agent stepped out with a clipboard and approached Sarah. Even from a house away, we could pinpoint the exact microsecond the reality crushed her. The house was sold. Sarah's shriek echoed down the entire block. "That is impossible. She cannot legally sell this house." Ryan whipped out his phone and started frantically dialing, probably trying to get a lawyer on the horn. They stood out on that sidewalk for over an hour, pacing, screaming into their phones, trying to figure out a legal loophole. Martha reached over and squeezed my hand. "Are you okay, sweetie?" "I am," I answered, and I meant it down to my bones. For the first time in years, I'm actually okay. By mid-afternoon, Sarah came back, flanked by a guy in a sharp suit, definitely the attack dog lawyer Ryan had called in. They argued with the real estate agent for a long time, scrutinized the paperwork, made a dozen phone calls, but the math was undisputed. I was the sole legal owner, and I had every constitutional right to liquidate the asset whenever I damn well pleased. As the sun started to set, Sarah marched up Martha's driveway. She knew Martha and I were tight, and she probably deduced I was holed up inside. When the doorbell rang, my heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my breathing steady. Martha opened the door. "Hi, Sarah." "Martha, is my mother in there? I know she's in there. I need to speak to her right this second." "Sarah, your mother explicitly asked me not to allow visitors. She needs time to process." "Martha, please. She sold our freaking house. How could she do something so psychotic? Where are we supposed to live? The kids are terrified." For the first time, I heard raw, unadulterated panic in Sarah's voice. It wasn't entitlement or rage anymore. It was the primal terror of someone who just had the rug ripped out from under them. "Sarah, maybe this is a good time for you to sit down and really think about how you treated your mother," Martha said, her voice like steel. "Hope deserves respect, not to be treated like the hired help in the house she paid for." "But I didn't treat her like a maid. She always loved taking care of the house. She's always been a workaholic." "Sarah, I watched everything from my window. You barked orders, she obeyed. You shut her out, she took it. You belittled her, and she swallowed it." I heard Sarah's breath hitch as she started to sob. "Martha, I didn't know. I didn't realize I was destroying her. Ryan, his family, I just wanted to impress everyone so badly that you completely forgot to value the one person who always had your back," Martha finished for her. Sarah stood on that porch for a few more minutes, weeping and begging to see me, but Martha held the line. She didn't give me up. That night, sitting alone in Martha's guest room, I let a single silent tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of regret, and it wasn't a tear of longing. It was the pure, distilled tear of liberation. At 68, I had finally learned how to put my own dignity above unconditional love. On Friday, I signed the final closing papers for my new condo. It was small, but it was absolutely flawless. 2 bedrooms. I turned one into my personal studio and office, a sun-drenched living room with a balcony, a fully equipped kitchen, and a stunning view of a canopy of trees in the park below. The building was full of people my age, some widows like me, others just hitting the reset button after retirement. When the realtor dropped the keys into my palm, a shockwave of emotion hit me that I hadn't felt in a lifetime. Those little jagged pieces of metal represented my independence, my choice, my rebirth. "Congratulations, Hope. I know you're going to be incredibly happy here," the realtor said, smiling warmly. "I know I am," I replied. And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. Over the weekend, with Martha's help and 2 guys from a local moving company, I hauled my modest belongings into the new apartment. I didn't have much. 45 years of chronic self-sacrifice teaches you how to survive on the bare minimum. But every single object I brought carried massive weight. My vintage sewing machine, the one I used to stitch Sarah's Halloween costumes, stacks of hardcover books I never had the luxury of time to actually read, a few potted plants I managed to rescue from my old garden, and the photos that actually mattered, the ones that captured genuine, unfiltered love between me and Sarah, back when she still saw my worth. Sunday afternoon, I was wiping down the counters in my new kitchen when my cell phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered. "Hello? Grandma, is that you?" My heart flatlined. It was Matthew, my 12-year-old grandson. "Matthew, how did you get this number?" "I snuck Mom's phone." "Grandma, where are you? Why did you leave? Mom said you sold our house." The boy's voice was trembling, thick with tears and confusion. For the first time since I pulled the pin on the grenade, a sharp, physical pain twisted in my chest. "Matthew, Grandma had to go to a place where she felt respected and loved," I explained, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "But I want you, Grandma. I miss you. You don't love me anymore." The tears broke containment and started streaming down my face. "Matthew, I love you and Chloe more than anything on this earth, but sometimes adults have to make agonizing choices just to keep their dignity intact. I don't know what those big words mean, Grandma. I just want you to come back. Mom is crying every single day. Dad is screaming all the time. We're living at Grandma Constance's house, and it's so small. I hate it here." I squeezed my eyes shut and sucked in a ragged breath. For one dangerous second, I almost caved. I almost gave him the address. But then the highlight reel played again. Sarah introducing me to Constance as the live-in help. Ryan bragging about scoring free domestic labor. Being actively barred from every single family milestone for the last 3 years. "Matthew, one day when you're older, you're going to understand that Grandma had to do this so she wouldn't completely lose herself. I love you so much, kiddo." I hung up the phone and sobbed harder than I had in a decade. It wasn't out of regret. It was pure, unadulterated grief for a family that threw away their chance to value me while I was still there. That night, sitting out on the balcony of my new apartment, staring out at the grid of city lights, I processed the fallout. Sarah was finally calculating the true cost of what she lost. Ryan was figuring out that living rent-free at your mother-in-law's house comes with a brutal psychological price tag. And the kids were getting a crash course in the reality that actions have heavy consequences. My phone lit up again. Sarah. This time I picked up. "Mom." "Hi, Sarah." "Mom, please. Please forgive me. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you so badly. I just didn't realize how terribly I was treating you. Please come back. We'll pool our money, we'll buy a new house together. We can start over." "Sarah, do you have a roof over your head?" I asked. "Yes. I do too. We're going to walk our own paths now." "But Mom, I'm your daughter. You can't just abandon me like this." "Sarah, I didn't abandon you. For 45 years, I was front and center for every single second of your life. I was the one who got abandoned when you downgraded me to a servant out of pure convenience." I didn't know. I swear I didn't realize it. You didn't want to realize it, Sarah. There's a massive difference. Mom, just give me one chance. Let me prove I can be a better daughter. For a long, agonizing moment, I hesitated. The mother's love that I had carried like a cross for nearly 5 decades screamed at me to fold, to forgive, to go back to the familiar pain. But a much wiser voice, the voice of hope, reborn at 68, whispered in my ear, "Some lessons only stick when the damage is permanent." Sarah, I truly hope you find happiness. I hope you learn how to value the people who matter before the clock runs out. But my shift as your endlessly devoted, self-sacrificing mother is over. Right now, I am just Hope, and I am going to live the life I actually deserve. Take good care of the kids, Sarah. And maybe one day, if you've done the heavy lifting and actually changed, we can cross paths again as two women who respect each other. I hung up the phone and flipped it to silent. I sat out on that balcony deep into the night, letting the cool breeze wash over my face. At 68 years old, for the first time in my entire existence, I was truly unapologetically free to be the woman who had been buried under the mask of the perfect mother, a fierce, independent woman who demanded respect. I remembered the words my own mother told me decades ago. Hope your name means the unshakable confidence that better days are coming. Don't ever forget that. I smiled in the dark. After a lifetime of nursing everyone else's dreams, I was finally wide awake in my own. And for the first time in forever, the horizon looked infinite. 2 years have burned away since I locked the door on my old life for the last time. These days I wake up at 6 in the morning, not because I have to brew coffee for an ungrateful boss, but because I actively choose to start my day early to soak up every drop of peace I've earned. My little apartment has evolved into a bulletproof sanctuary. Every object has a designated place, handpicked by me. Every corner radiates the personality I kept locked in a box for decades. My morning routine has become a sacred ritual of pure liberty. I wake up, slide the balcony glass doors open, and pull the crisp morning air deep into my lungs. I brew my coffee, just one mug, exactly how I take it, dark and sweet, and sit out on the balcony to watch the theater of the park below. Old folks getting their steps in, kids sprinting toward the school buses, young professionals rushing to beat the traffic. Life is happening naturally and constantly, and I finally get to just sit back and watch it without having to sprint to fulfill someone else's demands. My balcony has transformed into a lush little jungle. I tend to it with the exact same devotion I used to pour into the garden at the old house. But now the bitterness of watching my labor go unnoticed is completely gone. I've got pots of African violets, a row of aromatic herbs, and a small rose bush I picked up last month. Every plant is a metaphor for my rebooted life. The violets stand for the fragile softness I rediscovered in myself, the herbs for the gritty practicality that kept me alive, and the roses for the stark beauty I've learned to appreciate in the smallest things. Every morning after I finish my coffee, I water my plants and marvel at the empire I've built at 68. It's a bizarre phenomenon. I actually feel younger today than I did at 50, back when I was dragging around the crushing weight of being indispensable. The miles on my body haven't reversed, but the absolute weightlessness of my soul has regenerated me in ways I never thought possible. Rose, my old neighbor, comes over every Saturday without fail. She is the solitary bridge I kept intact to my past life. Through her, I get the dispatch. Sarah and her family eventually moved into a cramped apartment in her mother-in-law's neighborhood after they blew thousands on lawyers, trying and failing to legally annul the sale of the house. Rose delivers these updates, carefully scanning my face for a reaction, but she quickly realizes I'm not harboring any burning rage or twisted satisfaction regarding their misery. I feel nothing but a serene, bulletproof indifference. It's like listening to gossip about people I used to know in a past life. Hope Sarah still asks about you sometimes, Rose mentioned last Saturday while we were sipping iced tea on the balcony. And what do you tell her? I asked, casually misting the rose bush. I tell her you're doing great, that you're just living your life. Well, it's the truth, I replied simply. Rose gave me that specific loaded look, the one people get when they're sitting on a heavy question, but don't know how to detonate it. I've known that look for years. Spit it out, Rose. What's on your mind? Do you do you ever think about trying to bury the hatchet? She is your daughter, Hope. I could see the raw, genuine anxiety in my friend's eyes. Most people cannot fathom the psychological math required for a mother to amputate a relationship with her own child, even when that child treated her like dirt. Society demands that maternal love be an infinite, masochistic sponge. Rose, for 45 straight years, I was Sarah's mother. I bled my love, my time, my adrenaline, and my dreams dry for her. And my return on investment was years of creeping indifference that mutated into absolute humiliating disrespect. I'm not furious with her anymore. I don't hold a grudge, but the well is dry. I have absolutely nothing left to offer that relationship. But she might have really changed, Rose pushed gently. She might have, I agreed, keeping my voice level. And if she truly has, she'll realize that my disappearing act was the only way I could salvage my dignity. If she hasn't changed, she's still sitting in the dark, thinking I blew up the family over some petty drama. That conversation with Rose chewed at the edges of my mind for the rest of the weekend. I took my usual afternoon walk through the neighborhood park, and I watched the other families. Fathers wrestling with their kids, grandmothers being treated like royalty by their grandkids, old couples walking hand in hand. For a split second, a phantom needle of melancholy poked at my heart. But then the tape rewound to my old reality. Waking up in the dark to serve, spending 12 hours a day buffering everyone else's disasters, going to sleep exhausted and totally invisible. I remembered the dinners where I was treated like a ghost, the massive financial decisions made about my own house without my input, the daily 1,000 paper cuts of being treated like a highly functional appliance instead of a human being. No. Deliberate, curated solitude is infinitely better than company that strips you of your worth. During the week, I run a tight schedule that brings me genuine, unfiltered joy. Mondays and Wednesdays, I volunteer down at a local assisted living facility, helping the older women organize their scattered memories into proper photo albums. It's wildly fulfilling to listen to their histories and help them anchor their legacies. So many of them walked through the exact same fire I did. Ungrateful kids' families that viewed them exclusively as free healthcare workers. Hope you had guts, Agnes told me last week. I should have pulled the ripcord when my son started treating me like garbage. Now I'm stuck here depending on him for every little thing, and he treats me like a burden. Agnes' courage doesn't have an expiration date. It's never too late to demand respect, I said, squeezing her fragile hand. But I'm 82 years old. Where am I supposed to find the horsepower to start over? The horsepower shows up the second you decide your dignity is worth more than your fear of dying alone. Those raw conversations at the facility are my daily validation that I made the right call. I look at these women who immolated themselves for their families, only to end up at the mercy of kids who view them as a chore, not a blessing. They are living in a strain of isolation that is 1,000 times more lethal than mine, because they are surrounded by blood relatives who don't see their value. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I hit the community center for a painting workshop. Turns out I have a killer instinct for watercolors, especially landscapes. It was something I always wanted to dabble in but never had the bandwidth for. Now I have all the time in the universe to mine this creative vein that had been fossilized inside me. Hope your pieces have this incredible, haunting serenity to them, my instructor Miriam noted after class yesterday. It's like you're painting from a place of absolute inner peace. I'm just in a very quiet chapter of my life, I explained, washing out my brushes. And it's the God's honest truth. For the first time in decades, I possess a deep structural peace that doesn't rely on anyone else's applause. I don't have to justify my existence. I don't have to bend over backward. I don't have to be useful just to be tolerated. I just get to be Hope. Fridays are strictly blocked off for maintenance. I hit the beauty salon, a luxury I literally never allowed myself before, and get my hair and nails done. My stylist, Sonia, has accidentally become my therapist. Hope you are a completely different animal than when you first walked in here, she pointed out last month. When you first sat in this chair, you looked like a woman who was just done. Now you've got this lethal spark in your eyes. That's because I finally started living for an audience of one, I explained while she worked the foils into my hair. But don't you miss your family? Your real family isn't determined by who shares your DNA or your mailing address. It's determined by who actually respects you and wants you to win. My family right now consists of the people I actively choose to let into my orbit. After the salon, I usually swing by the public library. I've developed a late-stage addiction to reading. I tear through the romance novels I always wanted to read but felt too guilty to buy. Biographies of ruthless, inspiring women, and heavy books on botany and art history. The head librarian knows me by name and keeps a stash of new releases behind the desk just for me. Saturdays are for hosting, rosé, and cooking something spectacular. Not because I'm ordered to, but because I want to. I discovered that I actually love the alchemy of cooking when it's a creative choice, not a chain around my neck. I bake complex cakes, test out wild new recipes, and invite Rosé over to play food critic. Sundays are my deep dive days. I sleep in, take a ridiculously long shower, and put on a beautiful outfit even if I'm not leaving the apartment. I eat lunch on the balcony with a paperback, spend the afternoon painting or archiving old photos, and at night I write in the journal I started keeping. Yeah, I document my life now. Not to bleed out my old traumas, those ghosts are already buried, but to keep a record of this renaissance. I write about the micro joys of the day, the fascinating strangers I meet, the blueprints for my future. Yesterday I wrote, "Today marks exactly 2 years of my new life. 2 years since I put my dignity above family convenience. I haven't regretted it for a single microsecond. I learned that self-love isn't selfishness. It's tactical emotional survival." Sometimes, usually on those quiet Sunday afternoons, my brain drifts to Sarah, and I wonder how she's navigating the fallout of her own hubris. I don't feel any venom toward her, and I don't pray for her downfall. I just feel a distant, echoing sadness, like thinking about an old friend from a past life who took a very wrong turn. Through Rose's intelligence network, I found out that Sarah and Ryan finalized their divorce. Rose told me Sarah is living alone with the kids in a cramped rental, working double shifts just to keep the lights on. She told me she finally understands what it felt like for you grinding yourself to dust to support a family that didn't appreciate you, Rose reported. For a fleeting second, a spike of emotion hit my chest. I couldn't tell if it was pity or a dark, vindictive satisfaction. I immediately shoved both feelings out the airlock. I don't wish Sarah harm. But I am not the designated superhero tasked with saving her from the consequences of her own actions. Rose people learn on their own timeline through their own pain, I answered coldly. Sarah is currently taking the master class in the lessons I tried to teach her with love for years. It's brutal, but it's required reading. Don't you even have the urge to see the grandkids? Matthew is 14 now. Chloe is 12. Ah, the grandkids. That is the one piece of shrapnel from this explosion that still twists in my chest sometimes. Matthew and Chloe didn't ask to be born to parasitic parents. They were just kids, absorbing the toxic culture of the house, learning to treat me like a maid because that's what their parents modeled. Rose, I love those kids more than the English language can articulate, but they are hitting an age where they are starting to grasp the concept of cause and effect. Watching your grandmother get treated like a stray dog and choosing to adapt to that behavior, that's a choice too. But they were just kids, Hope. They were. And now they are teenagers with fully functioning brains who can process what they participated in. If they genuinely feel the void of my absence and want to know who I really am, they'll track me down when they get their own driver's licenses. It's a jagged pill to swallow, but it's the absolute truth. I cannot place savior to a dynamic that other people actively torched, even when those people are my own flesh and blood. This morning, while I was sipping my coffee out on the balcony, I watched a family down in the park. A grandfather, his daughter, and his granddaughter, all laughing and playing together with genuine, effortless affection. A quick shadow of melancholy passed over me. I imagined what it would have been like if Sarah and I had managed to forge that kind of bulletproof, harmonious bond. But then the reality check hit. Harmony requires mutual respect, and that was a currency Sarah actively refused to spend for years. You cannot build a bridge from one side of the canyon when the person on the other side is actively throwing dynamite at the pillars. I drained my coffee, watered my jungle, and started getting dressed for my shift at the nursing home. Today I'm helping Mildred archive old Polaroids from her 20s into a leather-bound album. She told me she wants to leave her history perfectly curated for her great-grandkids, even though they barely ever bother to visit. Hope, do you really think they're ever going to appreciate these photos one day? She asked me last week, her voice cracking. Mildred, our only job is to preserve our own history with absolute dignity. It's their job to figure out its value. That is the core thesis of what I've learned over these last 2 years in the wild. Our primary directive is to protect and nurture ourselves with ferocious respect. Whether or not anyone else recognizes that value is entirely their problem. And if they choose to look the other way, that is their catastrophic loss, not ours. Right now, as I scratch these thoughts into my journal, sitting on my sun-drenched balcony on a lazy Sunday afternoon, I feel a tidal wave of gratitude for the sheer guts it took to choose my own dignity over the suffocating convenience of family. At 70 years old, I cracked the code. It is literally never too late to burn it all down and start over, as long as the foundation of the new house is built on self-respect and reverence for your own history. I look over at my rose bush. It's exploding with color and heavy with perfume, and I can't help but smile. It's blooming because it's anchored in rich soil, soaking up the right care in a healthy environment, just like me. I spent 45 years trying to bloom inside a toxic wasteland, constantly blaming myself for my own wilted leaves. Now at 70, the math finally makes sense. It was never my job to force myself to thrive in soil that was actively poisoning me. It was my job to uproot myself and find a place where I could actually grow. And I found it. My apartment is small, but it's my kingdom. My routine is quiet, but I'm the one writing the script. My inner circle is tight, but it's entirely populated by people who know exactly what I'm worth. My life is simple, but it's packed to the ceiling with things that make my heart beat faster. For the first time in decades, I wake up every single morning actually curious about what the day is going to throw at me. Not because my calendar is choked with obligations, but because I possess the absolute terrifying freedom to choose exactly how I spend my time. I can paint if the muse hits me. I can read if I want to escape. I can just sit on this balcony and watch the earth spin if that's what my soul demands. This radical freedom of choice, which probably seems so basic to most people, is the greatest, most intoxicating luxury I have ever tasted. Last Friday, Sonia hit me with a heavy question while she was blow-drying my hair. Hope, if Sarah walked through that door right now, dropped to her knees, begged for real forgiveness, and proved she had actually changed, would you let her back in? I stared at myself in the salon mirror for a long time before I answered. Sonia, 2 years ago, I would have said yes before she even finished the sentence. Today? I know that some wounds heal a hell of a lot better when you don't keep ripping the stitches out just to check on them. Even if she's a completely different person now. Because if she really has changed, she'll understand that she had to lose me to learn the lesson. And she'll respect my right to protect my peace. We're dying to know how far this story reached. Where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below and let us know. Because sometimes the most powerful fresh start you can ever make is the absolute silence you choose to keep.